joint meeting of the Aliarthiosophical Federation and Aliarthios Studio. Today our guest speaker is Mrs. Sonal Murali from Adyar and director of Aliarthiosophical Academy. Before starting our meeting, I request please Brother Raman to open the meeting with the universal prayer. Thank you very much.
Good evening. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other.
Thank you, Brother Raman. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Sister Sonal Murali, who currently is the director of Aliarthiosophical Academy. And she is also a long-standing member of the Theosophical Society. She worked at Adyar as a young volunteer for more than a decade, primarily in the editorial department. During that period, she was also involved in various activities at the headquarters, such as the Social Welfare Center, New Life for India movement, and Beauty Without Cruelty. After gaining experience in the educational field at the Krishnamurti Foundation and other schools, she returned 3 years ago to establish Aliarthiosophical Academy, where I have to say she is doing an amazing job with education and transformation of children's lives and families' lives. So with no further ado, it's our pleasure to welcome today Sister Sonal Murali, who is going to talk about living from the center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catalina, and thank you, Brother Raman, Shikhar, Catalina, for organizing this and inviting me to share my thoughts on the topic today is living from the center. And I thought it was very important for us because centering is very, very crucial in any system. And so today we'll be talking about living from the center, and hopefully we'll have certain questions that we can then ponder upon. So as I said, center is the balance point of any object. So we take any nature created system or we take any human created system, there is center or centering that is crucial. So if there is no centering, then it does not remain a stable system. Just like how when the moon orbits a planet or a planet orbits a star, both bodies are actually orbiting around a point. And that point, the center, is very, very crucial. Do we live from such a center? Do all our thoughts, our actions, our words, they arise from a cohesive entity that we consider or we refer to as I? So when we look at ourselves, we find that we are a mixed bag. So there are moments when we are completely connected, we are grounded, we are rooted in ourselves. And then there are also moments when we react or we act not in a very wholesome kind of manner. Often we are in a reactive mode, and most of the time we are consumed with the minute to minute or day to day troubles or tasks or preoccupations that life has thrown at us. And there are also meditative moments. But still, overall, it seems that we have drawn a kind of circle around us that we refer to as I. And that becomes our microcosm. And there is a strong sense of identity of me interacting from within the circle with the rest, the outer. So we find that this wholesomeness is not there. Even there is a difference in the way we act in the presence of some people or the way we act when we are by ourselves. We may be very polite and sophisticated in certain kind of groups or environments, but not so probably in other situations. There is also often irritation or some kind of dissatisfaction that lingers. Recently, when the rains pounded Chennai and people who were impacted, certainly there would be a lot of dissatisfaction against the system and corporation, climate, etc. So there are times when we are at our best, and then there are times when we are not at our best. So in a day, also there are phases. So there are phases when our responses change. As I said, we may have stepped out of the house in a very serene kind of mood, and very quickly we might lose that and start complaining about something or the other. So we lose our mindfulness, which we might have gained during our moment of meditation in the morning. And then we start giving a diatribe against people in general. There's also this societal conditioning, and there are collective responses which are taken for granted. And it is okay to say those things without giving much thought to it in our minds. And so we can say that in a day, there are a number of opportunities that appear in front of us where our response is far from the response we would give when we are in a calm or meditative state of mind. And if we can use or coin a word such as unwisdom, often we act out of state of unwisdom. So there are many ways our actions are not cohesive. So what is that wholesomeness that is missing in us? What is that complete integrity, and how to bring that about? What does it mean to be rooted in ourselves? And if there is a center, what it is and what does it mean to be living from the center? Are we aware of our state of being when we respond to others? Most wise beings have asked us to stay with the question of who am I? And that seems to be a pertinent question. And to negate all that arises within us after asking the question. We wish to believe that there is some unit in us that we can call as me. There is some kind of tangible entity. Daryl Rene has said that the biggest fear that man suffers from is the ending of this unit that is called me. And the ending of entity we have identified with me, as me. And now if we can break it down and see that what we call ourselves, what that unit consists of. So we start with the human body, which is nothing less than a miracle, because it is composed of trillions of cells, with each one of the cells having an independent life with its own agenda, and that agenda has nothing to do with what we do. None of them are particularly geared to what one wants, the self wants to do, or what one is doing. For example, now we are talking and listening and looking at the screen, but the cells are concerned with their own scheme of things, their own nutrition, their own reproduction. They are creating and nurturing a hospitable environment within our body for themselves. And as if this is not enough, there are also the bacterial cells, and they outnumber the body cells by about 10 times. So we are more bacteria than human. And some of them also participate in the processes of the human life form. Now, apart from that, there is the cellular memory. The food that we ingest, it comes with its own cellular memory. And if one is eating non-vegetarian food, then it also includes the pain that the animal has gone through at the time of its very sudden and violent death. Organs also have their own consciousness. And this has been proved in the cases of organ transplant. So a number of these organ transplant recipients have actually said that their behavior has altered after the organ transplant was done. Sometimes after the surgery, even their diet and interests have changed. Their behavior also has changed in some cases, such as the transplant of heart. Now, let us look at heart as an organ. So heart has its own intrinsic nervous system, and it contains 40,000 neurons. It acts independently of the brain, sending and receiving meaningful messages of its own. Even the DNA in our chromosomes, not all of it comes from our evolutionary ancestry. Some of it is borrowed from elsewhere. And it includes genes from at least 8 retroviruses who take over a cell and perform important functions. So when we look at the physical processes, there is very little to suggest an I. And you can see that it's a conglomeration of cells and bacteria and organs and different systems. And the same goes for thoughts, emotions, and aspirations. And yet, for a particular action, these trillions of cells, they act in cooperation and in unison. Even a conscious action of picking up an object has more of unconscious precursors, and the brain is fired up even before the decision to pick the object. So even at the level of the physical body, there is this cooperative effort among these varying levels and streams of consciousness. And that is the physical I that we point to. And higher to that is the soul of man, the higher center. That is the central principle that orchestrates all the systems. The consciousness at every level becomes more extended. So let us look at thoughts. At the physical level, we all seem to be separate beings, and yet we inhabit each other's spaces continually. In the Mahatma letters, it is said that from moment to moment, each one of us is engaged in a process of peopling our current in space with our ideas, with our emotions, with various sentiments and various sensations that we experience. So we are continuously populating, creating a population of these things that surround us. Some of it we carry with ourselves, and some we leave as traces, as our traces. So we create a thought atmosphere around us. And we have all experienced this, that with certain people in certain places, along with other like-minded people, it is easier to think on different things, such as the meeting that we are having now. Some people also carry a presence that communicates at the subtle levels. And we have heard this about Lord Buddha and other beings. Emerson has said that who you are speaks so loudly that I can't hear a word you are saying. So there is this atmosphere we create with every thought we think, with every aspiration we hold, and this atmosphere continually interacts with others who are around us. It is like an arm that we are carrying, that we are carrying around with us. And it might be similar on the invisible plane also, because we carry with us all that occupies our mind and our hearts with all its positive and negative tendencies. And these are potent to an extent. We have invested energy in them and sustained them. So in a day, about 70,000 thoughts go through our minds. We falsely think that we are thinking them. The Western materialistic view has propounded that I think, therefore I am. whereas the ancient Indian tradition says that I am, therefore I think. Rig Veda also states that let noble thoughts come to us from all directions. In theosophical literature, there are detailed accounts of invisible life forms and intelligent patterns of energy that surround us from time to time, from moment to moment. So in this sense, we can see that nothing is an isolated endeavor. And the tendency to think that I am the doer is probably completely illusory, because for any endeavor, it requires cooperation of a multitude of life forms, visible or invisible. Everything that flows to us is from outside, from the others. To sum up, we live in a flux where our bodies are made up of millions of cells having their own life cycles and agendas. As far as thoughts are concerned and emotions are concerned, we are constantly populating the atmosphere with our thoughts and emotions. And we also live in the atmosphere populated by other people's thoughts, emotions, and aspirations. Yet we all feel that we have an identity, a crystallization of our patterns, responses, reactions from which we operate. And we refer to that as I. The book, The Hidden Life of Trees, written by Peter Wolleben, it gives us a glimpse of the world of trees, especially in a forest. And this analogy probably will make us understand how a system functions in cooperation and in unity. So there is an amazing scientific process of life, death, regeneration, support, and communication that the trees have among themselves. They have an elaborate network under the ground, using their roots and fungus for communication. And when we go to a forest, we might feel that these mighty trees are standing by themselves, but it is nothing like that. It is almost like a wood wide web. They support the weak ones, they pass on the nutrients, they create an ecosystem that is conducive for the entire group, and they are all protected. And that is how they can live to be very, very old. We are talking about an old forest. So if a giraffe came and started eating leaves, immediately the peripheral plants would pass on the message and change the chemistry of the leaves so they become bitter to the taste for the giraffe. When they have an infestation of a certain insect, they can produce a pheromone which will attract the predator for this specific insect. And the fungi that pass messages underground are another life form, but they are related to the root. And the entire fungi can be as big as a huge city underground. So actually there is no such thing as an isolated tree. There is a forest from which all these participate and draw their life. So there is intelligence operating throughout the universe. Even the tiniest little process happening in our own body is due to an intelligence operating at another level. And the same holds true of a thought as well as a feeling. In Mahatma letters, this process has been related in detail. Every thought of the man being evolved passes into the inner worlds and becomes an active entity. By associating itself with an elemental, one of the semi-intelligent forces of nature, it survives as an active intelligence, a creature of the mind's begetting. And so good thought is perpetuated as an active, beneficent power, and the evil one as maleficent demon. A man is continuously peopling his current in space with a world of his own, offspring of his fancies, desires, impulses, and passions. a current which reacts upon any sensitive or nervous organization which comes in contact with it. Still, when we think of the thinking capacity of each individual, we think of it in terms of it being separate from others. We project our perception of reality, which is a projection of a separated universe with separate beings functioning independently. And then we tend to operate in this way. Our entire language is built in this way. It starts with I, you, they, we, us, etc. So all our systems, our strategies, our planning, all social, cultural theories are all based on this sense of separateness. But every thought attracts to it that which makes it more active in the world and gives it a more sustained life. So a flower attracts a butterfly, and if you leave any food outside and it rots within very, very short time, you will see that it attracts another kind of life. So these are the laws that govern the world. And when we close our eyes and go to the inner world, it is the same kind of laws that operate. Every thought attracts to it that which makes it more active in the world and give it more sustained life. And if a thought which is unkind or uncharitable or unseemly or unkind, that also attracts its own kind of thought to it and makes it more active and gives it a more sustained life. So according to the thoughts we think, we end up peopling our current and space, and we carry that with us wherever we go, and we influence each other. And even when we have left the space, we leave the traces of it behind. Hence, one of the primary requirements of any spiritual practice is satsang, the company of good people, the company of people with similar bent of mind, be it people, be it books, music, nature, etc. At this point, we can refer to Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who propounded the theory of morphic resonance, that biological inheritance in species is not all transferred through coding in the genes. And he says that our brains might be acting more like TV receivers than merely memory recorders. So just like how TV receives signals, we would be receiving whatever we designed ourselves to be. Thus, each individual member of the species inherits a collective memory from past members and also contributes to the collective memory affecting other members of the species. So if a species, if certain animals have learned something in one part of the world, it may be instantly transmitted to the same species in the other part of the world through morphic resonance. HPB spoke about three streams of consciousness that constitutes a human being, and thereby making him a complex being. Atma Buddhi, Manas, and the terrestrial personality, spiritual, intellectual, and physical. Each of these three having their own laws and ruled and guided by different sets of the highest Dhyan Chohans. Each is represented in the constitution of man, because man is the microcosm of the macrocosm. So the focus of our human journey towards self-realization is at the center point of manas or mind. HPB also said that whatever plane our consciousness is acting in, only ourselves and the things of that plane would for that moment be real for us. That would be the reality that we experience. So the positioning of our consciousness along this range of possibilities, that determines what we see as real at any moment. So if we are angry, the world seems very hostile and aggressive. And if we are depressed, the world seems devoid of joy. And so each experiences the reality as per the positioning of his or her own consciousness at that moment. And so in that sense, it is a self-perpetuating cycle. What we see and experience, that further limits our consciousness and so on. An analogy of this is the World Wide Web, which has completely changed our life as we know it. As we surf on the internet, social media and YouTube, it keeps giving us the same feed and keeps us trapped in that bubble. This has been referred to as echo chambers. This is the new challenge of the digital world today. So our effort should be to focus on the highest within us and elevate our center from a self-oriented one to a more expansive one. What we have unique within us as human beings is the manas or the mind, which gives us the power of conscious choice. Not only we must face the consequences of our choices, we must also recognize that others cannot make our choices for us. Manas is the principle which makes self-consciousness and therefore choice possible. And as one writer has put it, if we fail to exercise this power, we shorten the stature of our soul. Probably the central lesson of the Bhagavad Gita is not so much that Arjuna must act as that he must act out of his own choice. He must reach his own decision and understand the basis on which his action rests. For Arjuna, who is symbolic of each one of us, he longed to have someone else solve his dilemma. And this is so typical of all of us. We want to go to someone else to show us the way or to give us the answer to solve our own dilemma. But this has to be worked out through manas by a conscious choice that we make. Because for each person, the answer may differ. Because each person's dharma is different. The form of the moon must be known through one's own eyes. It is said in the Vivek Chudamani. Saint Paul has said that think on these things. He said that whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, admirable, and noble, think on these things, as it has a profound potential to alter our consciousness. It keeps the mind centered on the goodness of things. There is a Chinese spiritual teaching that says that plant with no thought of harvest, because planting is important and the thought of reward is a distraction. Such awareness of the intent helps one to be in the moment. Are we aware of the intents of what we say, do, and think? Daryl Rene, a microbiologist, has asserted that we do not stand alone. We are all interlinked. All is one. And that is the convergent message of both science and the sacred sense. So each time he says that we make a choice, the conscious choice using our manas, that puts ourselves ahead of the other. Each time we withhold a word of compassion from a troubled friend, we shift the balance, albeit perhaps slightly, towards our collective extinction. Because when you put yourself ahead of others, then you are working against the unity of life and the unity of existence. By contrast, he says that each time we smile at someone in the street, each time we extend a caring hand to a fellow creature in distress, he says we move all of us towards light, albeit in a very, very small way. And he says to acknowledge our interconnectedness is the beginning of compassion. Fritjof Capra has also said in his book, The Uncommon Wisdom, that he had just embarked on a scientific career. And there was Krishnaji, a radical spiritual teacher, who asked him to stop thinking. And he asked Krishnaji that how can I be a scientist and still follow your advice of attaining freedom from the known? Because my entire work consists with the known. And Krishnaji said that first you are a human being. First you have to become free. And this freedom cannot be achieved through thought. It is achieved through the understanding of the totality of life, in which every form of fragmentation has ceased. In Voice of the Silence, it is said that the pupil must seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer. He who awakes illusion, thoughts deflect the attention of the experiencer from what is occurring in the present moment. Daryl Rene says that each moment is an undiscovered country. This particular moment is undiscovered because we do not allow it to reveal to itself to us, because we block it by perpetuating past memories or future aspirations. So unitive consciousness, which is a focused state of awareness, that is what we must aim at. If this were to become a constant background of our lives would change, and everything around us would also change. It would actually be possible to meet every situation without any prejudice, in a completely new way, without any preconceived or prior notions about that. And that will be the newness in it. We would be able to come to every experience in life without any prior assumptions, any reactions, without trying to predict outcome, without calculating what is good for me and what is not good for me, and without any analysis. A unitive mind possesses tranquility. And that is why we are told in the Bible, be still and know. Because if we are still and there is no noise that is coming from within ourselves, then we would know. It is by ceasing to allow thought to exercise itself in the mental realm that energy flows into and through the system. So the closer we are to the still center within us, the broader our outlook is, and understanding of the totality of life, in which every form of fragmentation has ceased, and that actually takes place. And when that fragmentation has ceased, that is when that integrity comes about and wholesomeness comes about. So what does it imply to live from the center as far as our inner arena is concerned, and as we interact with the outer constantly? One of the common methods suggested in spiritual traditions is to withdraw the senses, minimize the interaction with the outer world till one is centered enough to understand the workings within oneself. Because it is very important to first stabilize within oneself and then go outwards and do the outside work. So to be either every day or in our own lives. So to be mindful of the outer and of the inner. Krishnaji also asked us to watch the thought in a very alert manner. And one of the example he has given, which is very well known, is that you should watch your mind in such a manner as if you are closed in a room with a poisonous snake, and you would be watching every movement of the reptile. So centering becomes crucial in a spiritual understanding. In Indian thought, we have Sri Yantra or Sri Chakra. a sacred geometric pattern that is used to unravel secrets of the universe for millennia. A diagram formed by interlocking 9 triangles radiating from a dot. It is a geometric pattern that Advaita Vedanta says is the key to mastering the science of creation, of what you don't, of what you want, and destruction of what you don't want. Sri Yantra is much like a pilgrimage for a yogi, because with each step, the yogi ascends from the base towards the center, ultimately uniting with the universe. It maps a seeker's spiritual journey from the earthly plane to final enlightenment, from the outer rectangles to the center dot, which represents the center of the universe, the place of origin and unity where one merges with the supreme consciousness. Sir Edwin Arnold has said, when the dewdrop slips into the ocean. So when one merges in the center, that is where actually the expansiveness happens and one is united with the universe. One of the examples that I'm fond of giving is of Thich Nhat Hanh, and of the Vietnamese monk, and he has said, the tears that I shed yesterday have become rain today, which is an extraordinary statement where the boundaries between him and others have disappeared. And the sympathy that he expressed for one being, the tears that he shed for someone, it becomes the benediction for all without any difference. It's just like a grace pours down on everyone. Being in that state of oneness, of universality, the boundaries between you and I disappear, and that itself results in the benediction for all. And aware of the all-inclusive unity. For such a person, the circumference of the circle does not exist. And this is what it means to be fully harmonious and integrated. And the actions that spring from that insight have compassion, and that will touch one and all. So what does it take to cultivate such an insight? HPB says in her diagram of meditation that first try to conceive of unity by expansion in space. So in the centering process, through this expansion in space, we allow for something that exceeds our capacity of thought, because that is not within the capacity of thought. Both Krishnamurti and Ramana have suggested similar approaches. So if one is constantly with this question of who am I, then slowly it would raise our awareness by act of negation of identification with the self that takes place all the time. And Krishnamurti also asks us to be aware of the thought, and in that awareness which is arisen, which is the entire content of consciousness, Kama Manas. That is what Krishnamurti refers to as the entire content of consciousness. It will dissolve just by being aware. Negating whatever arises would take us closer to the point in the circle, because everything that is not me is outside of that point. Buddhism also speaks of mindfulness, constantly being mindful without any judgment or conclusions, without liking, disliking what we are observing, without any attachment or aversion, just being mindful. And then slowly, perhaps from this mindfulness, also the sense of witness may disappear. So most spiritual methods are not very complicated. They suggest very, very simple things, just one or two. Ramana Maharshi has also said that watch your breath and your attention would come to the present, as breathing is the only thing we can be aware of that is happening in the current moment. Even while watching the thought, as we become aware of it, it has already become past. Swami Ramdas surrendered to what was happening. So there was no entity there at all that was accepting, rejecting, liking, disliking, or even surviving. So he just surrendered completely. What is required is practice unceasingly. Practice, practice, and practice. Whenever the focus has wandered off, we just bring it back without any judgment, without any self-guilt, or without any goal in our mind or any other mental modification of the mind, chitta. Because chitta has the tendency to keep churning out all these vrittis, the modifications of the mind. That is the nature of the mind. The famous poet Shelley has written on life. He says, life and the world, or whatever we call that which we are and feel, is an astonishing thing. The mist of familiarity obscures from us the wonder of our being. The mist of familiarity. What was already there, what has become past. Anthony de Mello says that the problems only exist in the human mind. If you want to know what it means to be happy, just look at a flower, look at a bird, look at a child. They are perfect images of the kingdom, for they live from moment to moment in the eternal now with no past or no future. By the most refined deductions of the intellectual philosophy, we come to know to the unity of existence. The existence of distinct individual minds is also a delusion. The words I and you are mere grammatical devices. All of these approaches, they involve making a shift at the inner level in trying to move the awareness to the center and thereby recognizing and then creating a space for the sacred to live within us and to make itself known. We allow the perception of what is in front of us without trying to shape it. Because trying to shape is the activity of the entity. This in turn will make us reconnect with the spark within, which is a tiny part of the eternal flame from whence it has all emanated. Robert Browning has said that a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's the heaven for. In the poem to the Secret Doctrine, there's a description of a white disk with a dot in the center, from which the whole manifested universe emanates, Mahabindu. It refers to the great cosmic center of the macrocosm. And Bindu denotes the center of consciousness of the individual or the microcosm, which is situated between what is called Kutastha and the Sahasrara, the crown chakra. Dr. Taimini has described the Bindu as a symbol of all-inclusive unity. The point is the basis of space, because an infinite number of planes can meet at a point. That is the center. So esoterically speaking, both the one and the many coexist at the central point. Whereas as you move away from the center, the scope becomes more and more limited because you can perceive only from that reference point. And so your view and your perception becomes limited. Only the nature of that separate line can be known. When we are at that still point in the center, we see things as a whole in that moment. The further away from the center we move, the more partial our comprehension of life actually is. Even science is coming closer towards it. And in the Big Bang theory, a scientist has said that it is not that there was one Big Bang, there were just Big Bangs in every point in the universe. In Bhagavad Gita, there's a description of the yogi whose senses are subdued, who is unwavering. And just as how a lamp in a windless place flickereth not, to such is likened the yogi of subdued thought, absorbed in the yoga of the self. For such a being, all division does not exist at all. And he's living from the center. The things of the external world appear equal. and a certain kind of benevolent impartiality that arises. The circumference of the circle no longer exists. The boundary is dissolved permanently. There is a famous quote, and we do not know its origin, that God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and its circumference is nowhere. Aikataimini says that as our consciousness sinks into the greater depths of reality, in its progress from the periphery to the center, the whole universe around us becomes endowed with greater depth, richness, beauty, and harmony. And owing to the removal, step by step, of our limitations, our consciousness sinks into the greater depths of our own center of being. So both at the external and internal levels, the process happens. Both happen simultaneously. The dual nature of things no longer affects such a being. Daryl Renner has said that through purifying your knowing from the noise of the ego, the you that is truly you can join the symphony of creation, and the song you have become can merge seamlessly into the music that is. To purify your knowing from the noise of the ego that is constantly there. I would like to end by speaking about Kuan Yin. HPB called her the divine voice. Kuan means to hear, the goddess who hears the cries of the suffering. When we ordinarily hear the sufferings of the world, that hearing is mixed up with our own internal noises, emotions, and thoughts. But when Kuan hears the cries of the world, she does so from a state of complete emptiness. Her response then is compassion, and it is infinite mercy. So try to live a life that is not encumbered and that is rooted in the center, and the center that is everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonalji, for such a wonderful and comprehensive presentation on this subject. I think you have covered so many aspects and dimensions, and through various examples, that I think there will be no more questions, because everything is very well understood. But still, at this point, we would like to invite from our delegates any questions or queries or clarifications if you have. And if you want to ask your question, kindly you can put it in the chat box, or if you raise your hand, we can invite you directly for your question. Okay, to begin, okay, we have one here on the WhatsApp. Yeah, I think, okay, it is very, okay. It says, you have mentioned living from the center of, living from the center. Can you also throw some light on the similarity of it with the story from the Mundaka Upanishad, story of two birds, one who is enjoying or indulging in the word and other is being the witness?
Yes, thank you. I think that again points to one of the methods that we had mentioned, which is by negation, one who is a bhogi, who is enjoying the fruits of the world, and one who is in the sakshi bhav. So one who is in the sakshi bhav is not involved in all the enjoyments and the pleasures that the world has to offer, and it is in the witness mode. And we can say that that bird in the witness mode is living from the center. And the one who is bhogi infinite. You can imagine that there is a point and then there are all the planes which are around it. So you can imagine how many different kinds of points from where a person can be operating. And so yogi is indulging in that. Nowhere near the center, probably.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for.
Thank you, Sonal. And now we have a raised hand of Sister Elka. Please, if you can unmute yourself and send your question.
Thank you. Sonal, you were mentioning one of the people that you were quoting from was Anthony de Mello. Could we know a little more about him? Who was he, or is the first time I'm hearing about him? Yeah, thank you.
I mean, he has said such things of practical, application. And there's also a book called 1 Minute Wisdom. I think that's also available online. There are a lot of small stories also that he has said. And so I think it's also available in our bookshop. And I'll maybe send some material to you. See, one of the contemporary.
Contemporaries of whom? Sorry?
Of the current times.
Of the current time. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have received another question from our WhatsApp. I will read it. Although you have mentioned some practical points, but still, could you explain us and throw more light on how can we bring this practice of living from the center in daily life situations, especially emergencies, tragedies, etc.? Can you give some practical tips that can be applied for anyone in this kind of situation?
I think that as I said, that most of the spiritual teachers have given us guidelines and sadhana which are very, very simple. And they start with mindfulness or non-identification with what is happening. I would say that there are times in one's life when, as you said, there could be many emergencies. There could be things that constantly throw you off balance. And probably at such time, the only thing we can do is look at our life, our day, and we can plug the holes. So there are so many things that we do which might not be necessary. So if our focus is on a certain thing, for example, if I give you a very common example, you are going to give an exam. And on that day, the entire focus is on the study and on giving the exam, and nothing else matters. And of course, it is said, see, when you are in a state of emergency or tragedy, it's difficult to believe this, but the universe does rearrange things depending on the focus that is there in our mind. So things somehow just rearrange themselves. But when there is some karma that is being worked out, it's difficult for us at that time to have faith. And I think faith also is one of the very, very important qualities to have in the path, that this too shall pass. And from our side, we have to do purusharth. We have to keep on doing effort because as is said, to attain effortless state, you need to put in tremendous amount of effort without any let up unceasingly. And so if the focus is there, then probably, those tragic times also, it would be easier to go through them. And then at the end of it, maybe more conducive environment will be created for us. Until then, we have to suffer with a kind of stoicness, equanimity of the mind, and not letting us. So that is also an opportunity for us to be constantly be aware and be mindful of what our response is and how this is impacting us.
So basically, there is no quick fix, And when the times are good, when the karma is good, we keep practicing these things. So when the time is difficult, we can put these things in practice. So thank you, Sonalji. And we have Dinakaranji, Secretary, Kerala Theosophical Federation. He wants to say something. Yes.
Sister Sonalji, thank you very much for your wonderful talk. The new term which you coined, Wood Wide Web, is interesting to everybody. And the Robert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance and all that. Thank you very much for the talk. And I congratulate you for giving this wonderful lecture. For the information of Sister Alka, this is the book which Sonalji has just mentioned. 1 Minute Wisdom by Anthony DeMello. It is available in TPH, I think, in our bookshop. So for the information of Sister Alka and others. So thank you very much for giving this wonderful lecture, Sister Sonalji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Dinakaran, for this sharing. And we have one more hand raised of Brother Basavaraya Reddy. Brother, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question. Although I guess you have also written it in the chat. No, it's different. So if you want to unmute yourself, please, so you can ask your question. Okay, maybe, okay, in the meantime, we are going to read a question of Brother Balajinara Jasab that has asked, do both Ramana Maharshi and Jyoti Krishnamurti teach us to surrender with the concept all is perfect and everything is the wish of the universe?
Thank you for asking for clarification. I think this is something misunderstood or miscommunicated. Both Ramana and Jiddu Krishnamurti, they spoke more about the approach, which is more about the reasoning skill, and that is asking yourself. Ramana spoke about who am I, and he said be with that question, and you will see that whatever comes up as what you consider as me, that is actually not me. And then you go deeper and deeper. And J. Krishnamurti spoke about the awareness. And he said in the awareness, the duality between the observer and the observed would probably, just neutralize, and there'll be only one. There'll be only the perception or being there. Surrender was Ramdas, Swami Ramdas. I think his ashram is in Kerala. And at one point of time in his life, he left his house. He considered himself as the das or sevak of Ram. And whatever was happening, he just took it as the wish of Ram. And so no entity left within himself at all. He just surrendered to whatever was happening to him. And he was also in that state of consciousness, which we can say that he was a realized being.
Okay, thank you, Sister Sonalji. Brother Basavaraja Reddy ji, you can ask your question.
Yes, sir. Man is mental in nature. His center is in the mind only. So he is treated as a separate entity. In order to become one with the universal soul, he has to move to the another center, that is universal center. That is the center of the universe. So in order to convert that mental center into the universal center, he has to make use of the consciousness, that is what we call awareness. Whether it is correct or not.
I think talking about the center of one's consciousness, which is the Atma Buddhi, and the universe, it is, if I can give an allegory used, it is Sir Edwin Arnold has said that dewdrop slips into the ocean, or dewdrop becomes the ocean. So I think that is how it is. Either we say that the self becomes one with the universe, or the self has no identity at all and it becomes the ocean. Ocean pours itself into the dewdrop, if we can use that. So it's two ways we can understand, but there is no other consciousness. There is no center of the universe. Actually everything we say that it only exists in our own mind. There is no reality apart from that. So the when we say that the complete unity, when the consciousness is in the state of complete unity, it is not it's just realization of that state of being. It can happen through microcosm, through the bindu which is there in us, and through that one becomes one with all. But as Madam Blavatsky and other higher beings have told us, that there are also higher and higher levels of consciousness. So what we understand now as this consciousness, that is only one level. There could be higher levels about which we are not aware at all.
Okay, thank you, sister.
Thank you, Sonalji. Any other questions or any inputs from anybody else? Otherwise, we will proceed for the closing session. Okay, so no more questions. Okay, before we proceed to vote of thanks by Brother Raman, Sonalji, some final words if you would like to say something.
I think you can also invite if anyone else wants to say anything.
Professor Shindeji is there, but I don't know if he's available. Yeah.
Oh, it is wonderful presentation, Sonal. Wonderful presentation. It is really good preparation and all quotes, everything we are contemplating now. So whatever Sonal has given to us, it is enough to study, contemplate, and go through all these steps. Very nicely she went step by step. If you study like this, that is a good presentation. I congratulate Sonal. Very nice, you said. And as Basavara Reddy and the other questions they asked, two birds. We are really in a world of both Bhoga world and Yoga world. So we have two parts within us. One part is observing, the other part is enjoying. So when Sonal has directed us to go towards that center, and as a second bird, she has given us instructions very wonderfully. I congratulate once again, and the whole program is wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Shindeji, for your inputs. And okay, now, okay, we'll be closing session, but before we go for a vote of thanks by Brother Raman, after that, we would be announcing the next program and the closing prayers. So I would like to invite Ramanji to say vote of thanks, please.
I thank Sonal Murali for her excellent presentation. It was very complete and comprehensive. The identity of me, what does it mean to be rooted to the center? How does one refer to oneself as I? Because the physical, I cannot be the physical body. And on a deeper level, when one says I, one is referring to the faculties of thinking, feeling, and willing. And she has also spoken about consciousness, which forever is undifferentiated. I once again thank Sonal Murali for her excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramanji. Thank you, Sonalji, and thank you all the delegates, participants who joined today's session. And now, before we proceed to our closing prayers, just a couple of announcements of next upcoming programs. That next Saturday, coming Saturday, that is on 27th November 2021, that is Saturday, there is a special program, but that will be in Hindi, that is on naturopathy and holistic health, Samagra Swasth or Prakritik Chikitsa by Sister Vasumati Agnihotri ji, and 27 November, 11 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. And then the next Sunday, that is 28th November, Pragyasya Studio cordially invite you to a talk in English on the mental body. As you know that we are taking up a study of one body every month. So we have done the causal body last month by Brother Matrunath. So this time we have the mental body by Dr. Rajiv Gupta and Dr. Mansi Bhagat, both from TS Delhi at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time on 28th November, which is 11:30 a.m. GMT. And one more reminder to everyone, please, those who have not yet registered for the International TS Convention, kindly do so as soon as possible and encourage others to do so by going on www.tsconvention.com. Please make your registration as early as possible. And now, coming to the closing prayer, let us all come together in heart and mind. Let us all come to the center of our being and use all our willpower and thought power for the welfare of every being in this manifestation. Om. May all become happy. May none fall ill. May all see auspiciousness everywhere. May none ever feel sorrow. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you once again for your participation and making this session vital. Thank you, Sonalji. Thank you, Ramanji. See you next time. Have a great week ahead. Namaste.
Namaste, everyone. Have a great week.